Hello, everybody. My name is Amalia Weber. I'm the program specialist here at Rochester Hills Public Library, and I'd like to welcome you to this evening's program, A Celebration, the Detroit Lions. Before we get started, I'd like to take care of a few housekeeping details. Firstly, tonight's program will be recorded and available to view about 1 week from tonight on our YouTube page and on the RHPL website shortly after. We ask that audience members please silence or turn off their cell phones before we begin in order to avoid any disturbances during the presentation. We'd also like to thank the Friends of the Rochester Hills Public Library and their many fundraising efforts. It's thanks to their support that we can provide wonderful programming like tonight's presentation. Our next program is a concert, the Boblo Islanders, which will be an in-person event on Sunday, January 15th at 2 p.m. You can sign up for that at calendar.rhpl.org. And now, without further ado, please welcome our presenter, Marty Gitlin.
Might not be a great idea to applaud for me yet, because if I stink, then you're wasting your applause. You might want to wait till afterwards. Is this on? Oh, okay. No, this is fine if it's okay with everybody else. I don't feel like I'm amplifying, but that's okay. I want to thank the library for bringing me here, and this is a great turnout. Thanks so much for being here. This is wonderful. I drove up from Cleveland to be here, so it was a three-hour drive, long trek, and I grew up in Cleveland, born and raised there, still live there, and it was back when I was a kid in the '60s, when kids actually played outside. Sunday morning was such a big deal for my family. We'd wake up early and have my mother would make breakfast of pancakes, and I would have a pancake eating contest with my older brother that he always won. Ate 14 pancakes in one sitting one time. My brother did. I had 11, but I could never beat him. And then we would go out and throw the football around on our front lawn. And we had a neighbor. We called her Old Lady Ryberg. And she, when you're a kid, everyone seems old. She was probably only maybe 50, but we called her Old Lady Ryberg. And she was the ultimate get off my lawn, person. And she would, yell at us whenever a baseball or a football would get on her lawn. And so one Sunday morning, I'll never forget it, we were throwing the football around, and she was standing on her front porch waiting for the football to get away so she could run and get it and steal our football. And sure enough, I overthrew my brother on a pass, and the ball landed right on her front lawn and right in the middle. And she ran to get it, and my brother ran to get it. And my brother got there just a split second before she did, and yanked the football away, and Old Lady Ryberg fell on her butt. And we were like laughing and stuff. It was mean, but heck, the football's on your lawn, big freaking deal, right? But anyway, I kind of put two and two together when I was in high school. Which I could barely do, but no, I'm just kidding. I loved sports, and I loved to write, and I said I'll be a sports writer. This was the 1970s. Kids didn't give enough thought back then as to what they were going to do with their careers, but I figured I'll be a sports writer. And I went to Ohio University, which had a tremendous journalism school. And I worked with some amazing people. And one of the people I worked with on the staff there at Ohio U, on the sports staff at the newspaper, was a guy you might remember because he worked at the Detroit Free Press. His name was Jay Mariotti. You remember him? He was just a tremendous writer and an equally horrible person. But that was one of the guys I worked with. And Peter King was on that staff, and he was the NFL beat guy for Sports Illustrated for many years. I mean, it was just amazing what we had there. And I graduated eventually. We used to say at Ohio University, we don't go to college, we go to Ohio University. That was our old joke. And I worked as a newspaper sports writer for 11 years, and I covered all the Browns' home games and a lot of their away games at that time, too. And I quit the newspaper business in 2002 because I could already tell with the internet and all these things going on that it was starting to tank. And I became a freelance writer and author for many, many years. For the last 20 years, I've been a freelance writer and author and presenter like I'm doing tonight. And there was one exception for that. From 2009 to 2012, I worked for CBS Sports, and I covered the Cleveland Browns as opposed to a football team. It was like, you guys know what that's like, here in Detroit, right? Lions. In fact, the Lions and the Browns are the only two long-established NFL teams that have never been to a Super Bowl. But anyway, CBS wanted me to move to Jacksonville, Florida, because that was their new policy. You had to live there in near their headquarters or something, and to stay employed. And I said, no, I can't do that. I got a family to raise, so I can't move to Jacksonville, Florida. And they had me doing fantasy baseball and football for a few years, and they still wanted me to move to Jacksonville, and I said, I can't do that. So that was the end of that, and I just kept writing books. I'll show you one of them right here. I covered, I love baseball. I'm a huge baseball guy, and I covered Major League Baseball for 20 years, and I wrote this book right here, The Ultimate Detroit Tigers Time Machine book. It's part of a series that I wrote, and I'll tell you a little bit about that after the program, which we're going to start right now. A lot of people, some people, I guess, know that the Lions franchise actually started in Portsmouth, Ohio, with the Portsmouth Spartans. I think, your typical fan might not know that, but here's a little bit about the years where they played in Portsmouth with a guy, a superstar named Dutch Clark was on the team, and I'll be talking about him a little bit later too. But here are the years in Portsmouth as the Spartans.
What's up, everybody? This is Brandon with Off the Beaten Path. We're here in Portsmouth, Ohio. Before we get started, please like and subscribe, help grow the channel. In this episode, we're going to start off talking about the formation of the first professional football league. After we discuss early football history, we'll then focus on the Portsmouth Spartans. Football as we know it today all started on September 17, 1920, in Canton, Ohio. During that meeting, a league was formed, the American Professional Football Association, and during its inaugural season, there was a total of 14 teams. It was here on October 3rd, 1920, in Dayton, Ohio, the first professional football game was played between the Dayton Triangles and the Columbus Panhandles. On June 24th, 1922, the American Professional Football Association became what we now know as the National Football League. Let's fast forward to the year 1928, the year the Portsmouth Spartans were founded. They would build Universal Stadium, the first stadium built for professional football. It was in 1930 the NFL asked the Portsmouth Spartans to join their league, and Universal Stadium would host its first NFL game on September 14, 1930. In their first year in the NFL, the Portsmouth Spartans went 5-6-3. Let's fast forward to 1932, the most famous game played by the Portsmouth Spartans. They played the Green Bay Packers, the reigning champs, in a game called the Iron Man game, where they only played with 11 players and no substitutions. They would ultimately defeat the Green Bay Packers 19-0. They would end that season tied, so the first NFL playoff game against the Chicago Bears. Unfortunately, they lost that game 9-0. The team was sold in 1934 and moved to Detroit. They became the Detroit Lions.
Okay, I know that guy didn't have the most exciting voice, but I wanted to get you a little bit of information about the Portsmouth Spartans. What it says here is the best all-around player in NFL history. That who knows? I mean, everything is debatable, but Dutch Clark, you couldn't even. It's hard to say what position he even played because there wasn't a lot of forward passing back then, and he actually played quarterback, but he was also running back, and he was a tremendous all-around player. Played defense as well, and I wanted to kind of get you familiarized with Dutch Clark because he is a legend and a Hall of Famer.
Dutch Clark started his career in 1931, playing for the Portsmouth Spartans. In his first season, he rushed for 9 touchdowns and was named first team All-Pro. The next season, he was once again named first team All-Pro, and he accumulated 568 yards and 6 touchdowns. Now, before you get confused, I will say that many people list Dutch as a quarterback, but that is more due to the fact that he was the team's signal caller. In addition to being the quarterback/running back, Dutch was the designated drop kicker, the last of his kind. A drop kick is like a field goal, but rather than placing the ball on the ground, the player drops the ball, lets it bounce, then kicks it through the upright. It is worth the same amount of points as a standard field goal or extra point. Throughout his career, Dutch also played defense, and while defensive stats were not kept, Dutch has been seen in film to have multiple pass breakups and possibly an interception. After the 1932 season, he quit playing football to go back and coach the Colorado School of Mines. In 1934, however, the Portsmouth Spartans moved to Detroit and became the Lions. They signed Dutch Clark to the team. That season, Clark led the NFL in total offense with 1,146 yards and 8 rushing touchdowns. He was second in the league in points scored with 73 and was once again a first-team All-Pro quarterback. And in their 8th game of the season, the Lions rushed for an NFL record 426 yards. That is an NFL record to this very day. And in a game against the Cincinnati Reds, Dutch rushed for 194 yards in a single game against Cincinnati in 1934. Third most for a Lion all time. That victory against Cincinnati extended the Lions' shutout streak to 7 games. That number has never been matched. That Reds team is arguably the worst team in NFL history and went 0-8 that year. But in 1935, Clark was once again the unanimous team captain and led the NFL in scoring. He led the Lions to the NFL championship game and had a 42-yard touchdown run in the second quarter. The Lions defeated the Giants 26-7. Following the season, the Los Angeles Times wrote Clark has been acclaimed as the greatest back in the history of the game. Dutch was described as a rabbit in the brush, and Red Grange called him the hardest man in football to tackle.
Okay. Let's do your first trivia question. It's funny, they talked about the stats. He had 546 total yards and everything. It sounds like, guys that do that in like 3 games nowadays. But people have to keep in mind that the game was completely different back then, and they only played like 8 games a year. It went up to 12, and then 14, and then 16, and then 17. So I actually wrote a book ranking the greatest American athletes of all time based on a point system I created. I had Michael Jordan number 2, Jim Thorpe number 1. And I always wanted to judge these athletes based on the eras in which they played rather than say, because there's undoubtedly athletes now are bigger, stronger, and faster, and they've gotten bigger and stronger and faster continuously over the last, century. So you really have to judge athletes by the era in which they played. But anyway, here's your first trivia question. I'm going to give you a layup reference to another sport, but give you a layup on the first one here. Who coached the Lions to NFL championships in 52, 53, and 57? That's right, Buddy Parker. Okay, good job. Okay, now let's get into something a little bit closer to the modern era here. 1953 championship. That might have been the best Lions team ever. They went 10-2 that year. They won their last 6 games in a row, and they were completely dominant. Actually, their defense was even better than their offense in those seasons, but they had a superstar quarterback named Bobby Lane that we're going to talk about here. And here's some highlights from the 1953 championship. And it's funny, I talked about how the 2 teams that have never been to a Super Bowl that are, long-time teams, the Lions and the Browns, and they played for the NFL championship a few times in the 1950s before fading away. The Lions faded a little bit earlier than the Browns did, but.
Throws his 3rd successful field goal of the day, gives the Browns a 16-10 lead with 4 minutes and 10 seconds left to play. the kickoff. The Lions put the ball in play on their own 20-yard line. Lane passes down and out to Jimmy Doran for a gain of 17 yards. 2 lane passes fall incomplete, but on third down, the cool Lion quarterback comes through under pressure with a 13-yard heave to Jimmy Doran. Detroit is battling both Cleveland and the clock. Lane is sticking into the air, and again he delivers as he hits twice Fox for 18 yards and a first down on the Browns' 36. The clock shows less than 3 minutes to be played as Bobby Lane fades to fire another aerial. Lane's going all the way on this one. He has a man open. It's Jimmy Doran, and he grabs it for a sensational touchdown. Pandemonium breaks loose in Briggs Stadium as Detroit ties the game at 16-16. Let's look at that thrilling touchdown play again in slow motion. Doran, the right end, is split wide. He streaks straight down the far sideline and gets behind the Browns' Warren Lahr. Doran grabs the ball right on the goal line for the touchdown. Doran is a second stringer who is playing in place of the injured Leon Hart. This was Doran's only touchdown of the season, and what a time he picked to make it. With the game deadlocked at 16-all, Toke Walker slams the ball through the uprights to break the tie and put Detroit on top, 17-16, with just 2 minutes and 8 seconds remaining to be played. Leading by 1 point, the Lions kick off. Lane's boot is taken by Kenny Carpenter on the 10-yard line, and Carpenter returns at 18 yards to the Cleveland 28.
Like that fake cheering.
Cleveland quarterback Otto Graham runs into trouble. Graham's pass is intended for Dub Jones. But it's intercepted by Detroit's Karl Kurilovats. Kurilovats races back to the Browns' 6-yard line, but the officials rule he stepped out of bounds on the Cleveland 34-yard line. That's the last time the Browns get their hands on the ball, as the game ends with the Detroit Lions successfully defending their title of world champions of professional football by turning back the Cleveland Browns in a thrilling, hard-fought 17-16 battle. In winning, Coach Buddy Parker gave credit to the outstanding play of his defensive line, which rushed Cleveland's Otto Graham to such an extent that Graham was able to complete only 2 out of 15 passes. So for the second year in a row, the Professional Football World Championship goes to the Detroit Lions.
Okay.
That's it for another year, fans. Another thriller from Miller. A great American sports championship. Brought to you with the good wishes of Miller High Life, the national champion of quality.
I thought I'd throw that in there. I forgot about that little piece there. Okay. Let's talk about Bobby Lane, who was an equally prolific passer and drinker. Notorious drinker. In fact, he would show up to games, with hangovers and have a few beers at halftime and so forth. Absolutely phenomenal. But he had such a great arm. And back then, one of the reasons that in this day and age, the completion percentages are so much higher than they were back then is because there's so much more short, intermediate and short passing than there was in the 50s and 60s, and the game has gotten so much more sophisticated offensively. Quarterbacks are just better than they used to be in a lot of ways. But he was a tremendous quarterback, and he could throw deep, and he could really hurt you with the long passes. When Bobby Lane got traded 2 games into the 1958 season, he put a jinx on the team. It's known as the Bobby Lane jinx, and he said that the Lions aren't going to win a title for 50 years. Well, what's that? The curse of Bobby Lane, yes. And he said the Lions weren't going to win a title for 50 years. Well, it's 65 years and counting now. But I liked what they did toward the end of the season. We could talk about that later on. But here's a little bit more about the great Bobby Lane.
In the Hall of Fame, there are few gamers who can rival the intensity of Bobby Lane. Bobby Lane was probably the greatest leader that I've ever been around. If we were in a war, he'd be like a Napoleon. He could just lead the troops to any victory that they wanted to lead them to.
I wanted to win. That's all I wanted to do is win a championship.
Bobby Lane on the quarterback sneak, pushes his way across, standing up, and the Lions leap in front.
In the 1950s, Lane was the Motor City's main man, guiding the Lions to 3 NFL championships.
You don't expect even temperament from genius. And Bobby was a football genius.
Occasionally, he was a hero with a hangover.
Three of us were laying on it. And I said, damn it, Bobby, we're going to get drunk smelling your breath. I said, you must have had a hell of a night last night. He looked at me, he says, I had a few at halftime.
Lane's going all the way on this one. It's Jimmy Doran, and he grabs it for a sensational touchdown.
One football curse of all time, the curse of Bobby Lane.
The curse of Bobby Lane is he is, if not for Barry Sanders, the single greatest Lion in history.
He was larger than life on and off the field. He led the team in every way. He led them from the goal line to the end zone to the bar after the game.
1957, he breaks his leg. They go on to win the championship with Tobin Rote at quarterback. They then trade Bobby Lane to the Pittsburgh Steelers.
And on his way out of town, he said the Lions won't win anything for 50 years.
Talk about sour grapes. This team won't win for 50 years, he said.
Lane cracks the top spot on our list, not for his sour grapes, but his very large grapes.
You're a stud when you can predict your own curse. Babe Ruth didn't try to put a curse on the Red Sox. They talk about the SI jinx or the Madden curse. Well, they didn't try for this. Bobby Lane did it. He cursed the Lions.
Do you have like witch's blood in your veins, Bobby Lane?
The curse of Bobby Lane? You would have to ask me that, wouldn't you? I don't know specifically what it is, but there's so many freaking curses around here. Why not throw Bobby into it? What is it?
It all started in the 50s, Detroit's golden years. The Lions were one of the dominant teams of the decade, winning 3 NFL championships. Their leader was Bobby Lane, a fan favorite who played hard on and off the field.
He could go out and spend hours the night before drinking. And in the fourth quarter, Lane would have one of his magical comebacks.
Bobby Lane makes like a burger as he sneaks through the 49ers for a touchdown.
Later that week, he would be in the courtroom because he would be arrested, and the judge would say, "You're slurring, Mr. Lane." Bobby Lane would say, "That's my Texas straw, Your Honor."
Okay. All right, let's do your second trivia question here. Let's see here. I know I wrote these down. Okay. Who pretty much took over the featured back role from Barry Sanders after Barry Sanders retired and had 2 1,000-yard seasons in 2000 and 2002? No? James Stewart. Very good. Good. Yeah, not to be confused with Jimmy Stewart, who was not the same. He was about 90 by that time. Anyway. Oh. Okay. This is only, I'm sorry for the kind of stilted here, but this is only like the third time I've done this particular program, so I apologize for that. But anyway, the Lions have been known, and I want to make sure I have the right video up because I have changed my videos.
The bump and run.
Yes, I have. Okay, good. The Lions have been known for being great at 2 particular positions over the years historically, one defensive back and one wide receiver, although, of course, Barry Sanders as a running back. But maybe the greatest of all, and they've had, like I say, great defensive backs, was Night Train Lane. Dick Night Train Lane was, maybe there were better defensive backs in terms of coverage, although he was great at that too, but there was no harder hitter, more intimidating defensive back in the history of football than Dick Night Train Lane, who would have been penalized on every play today. But he, with what became known as the horse collar tackle was it kind of invented by Bobby Layne. And here's a little bit more about his greatness.
We had so much, felt so much toward Night Train Lane that he came out in one ball game and said, "I don't even want you throwing the football over that side." I said, "You can't go into a ball game and give a guy a free ride. You just can't do that." But he said, "Don't throw it."
While Lane made Unitas pay dearly for defying Coach Reed Eubank, he often defied conventional behavior himself by wearing astronaut clothing and displaying a far-out personality. Night Train's tackles were anything but funny. His motto was "hang 'em high," and his signature hits were more like stranglings or beheadings.
I know when he went to Detroit Lions, and opponent at that time, you got to think about it because he hurt you.
Oh, he'd kill you. Kill you. He wouldn't tackle you necessarily fair. It wouldn't be a fair tackle. They made a head tackle an outlaw because of Night Train Lane. Train would just reach and grab him by his neck, pull him down, and that's called the Night Train neck tackle.
He'd grab your face mask. I remember somebody speaking to Train about it. Train said, "I'll grab him by his eyebrows if that's the way I can get him down."
Because if you don't hit him right, you break your elbow, your arm or something, you know. So you got to really get him right in front of you and hit him with that forearm and rip him up.
However, his love for hitting led to hateful mistakes. Sometimes he even traded punches and lost. The meek did not inherit this turn, and opponents went to any extremes to pay him back, to rub him out.
Okay. And I want to talk about another defensive back that was kind of like the next generation of defensive backs for them and is considered by some people as maybe the greatest of all time. And that's Lem Barney, and he was a little bit more subtle in the way he played, but he was a hard hitter too and a great ball hawk. You know, Lem Barney led the NFL in interceptions, and he was just he was just all over the field. And here's a little bit more about Lem Barney.
The Detroit Lions defensive back Lem Barney was always a big play threat. As a first-year player in Detroit, Barney won Defensive Rookie of the Year honors in 1967, picking off 10 passes in 14 games. Lem Barney played defense like a cat on a prowl, intercepting 56 passes and scoring 11 defensive touchdowns during his career.
I don't know about you, but I think that listening to the old NFL Films music was like almost like a religious experience. You know, it's just I loved it. Dun, 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 dun. I remember that one. That was my favorite. Lions have sure had some great number 20s, haven't they? Now, here's another trivia question for you. And it's kind of amazing, really. Between Bobby Lane and Scott Mitchell, the Lions only had one quarterback that was really the starting quarterback for more than 2 years. 3 years. One guy was for 3 years. And he was their quarterback from 70 to 72. What was his name? There you go. You guys are sharp, man. I'm not sliding anything by you guys. Yeah, very good. Greg Landry. Well done. Okay. Well, I guess that is one reason why. Where am I? One reason why from 1958 to 1981, the Lions were only in the playoffs once. And that was 1970. It was a real interesting year. They had a real good defense that year, and they kind of just snuck into the playoffs. They lost to the Cowboys 5-0 in the playoffs, so they didn't score a point in the playoffs until the 1980s. But their team was really kind of a fun team to watch, and they had a lot of balance offensively, and they had Charlie Sanders was their tight end, and they had Bill Munson and Greg Landry were their quarterbacks, and they weren't a great team, but they really got the city all hopped up over football because it was so rare when the Lions by that time were in the playoffs. But this is a little bit about the highlights of that 1970 season. I believe actually this might be the last game of that regular season when they clinched the playoffs, if I remember correctly.
For what seems like an eternity, loyal Detroit fans have turned out hoping to see a championship team. Although the Lions have not yet captured a title, their fans have not been disappointed. The ancient series with the Green Bay Packers has become a football classic. And as usual, this year's final meeting between the two teams was a hard-hitting affair. The capacity crowds that have packed Tiger Stadium have seen Detroit become a ferocious defensive unit. A devastating pass rush and the play of wily old veterans like number 44 Dick LeBeau completely silenced the Packers. This theft by LeBeau was the 56th of his career.
What a great DB.
The loyal Lion following has also witnessed the development of a potent passing game. Number 11, Greg Landry, has matured and now has a set of gifted receivers, including number 88, Charlie Sanders. But the thing that really turns the fans on is the play of Mr. Excitement, Lem Barney. Number 20, Barney, is a talented all-pro cornerback who is doubly valuable as a kick returner, and his runs often left the Lions deep in Packer territory. In the fourth quarter, Barney again displayed more of his dazzling talent as he knifed in front of Carroll Dale to steal a pass and raced to a touchdown. Barney's 49-yard run iced the 20-0 Lion victory and sent Detroit into a playoff with the Dallas Cowboys. Thousands of fans poured onto the field in an emotional expression for their Lions. All season long, they had thrilled at the passing of Landry, marveled at the running of Barney, but they had missed the greatest run of all. Up on the stadium roof, someone was executing a perfect hook-and-go pattern. A young admirer hooked the Lions flag and hot-footed away with a trophy.
Okay. There are two things that I can take from that video. One was Lem Barney was so elusive as a kickoff, as a returner. And number two was the cameraman really liked that blonde with the binoculars. 4 times they showed this. I mean, there's like 80,000 people there or whatever, in the stands, 70,000 people, and they kept showing the same woman. I mean, she was pretty, but really, seriously. Okay. One of the greatest debuts in the history of the NFL, and it's such a shame. He injured his knee in a game against the Minnesota Vikings in 1984, and it just really destroyed his career. And he would have, he was just absolutely phenomenal. Maybe, potentially, if he had maintained his career, one of the top 3 to 5 running backs in the history of the NFL. And this is Billy Sims, and he came out of the University of Oklahoma, #1 draft pick. And his moves and his brilliance was immediately felt. And this is his debut. And he's running like a 5-year veteran here. His debut was so incredibly impressive, and I wanted to show you some of the highlights of that particular game.
Fowler over the ball, and Danielson calling, and hands off to Sims, and Billy is out across the 40, and finally wrestled down at about the 43-yard line. Nolan Cromwell made the tackle to bring him down, but good block by Russ Ballinger.
The fast trap with a reverse pivot. Now, once Sims gets beyond the line of scrimmage, watch his running style. Good leg action, spinning, turning. Now, he also does not have that football protected then.
Billy Sims following Dexter Bussey, goes outside to the 5, touchdown. What a way to start his career. 390! Second man is Billy Sims. He bumped into Cody Jones, and he kept on going to get out across the 25. Billy Sims. Boy, I'll see you later.
Isn't that beautiful? Oh, again, a fast hitting play, a fast trap. Now watch Sims in the open field. Beautiful. That's three missed tacklers. See him spin. Look at him keep those knees going.
Great pursuit by Cromwell. You'll see him bump with Pat Thomas. There's Cromwell turning once. Cromwell turns twice, and Cromwell got him high. In Detroit's favor. Billy Sims. Oh, he's marvelous. He gets to the 41-yard line of Detroit, the Rams, moving it from the Detroit 48.
We talked about how much better your offensive line likes to block, but also it encourages them to get downfield. Throw a block downfield. All this guy needs is a little help. He'll go all the way.
What's remarkable is you don't see people blocking for him. You just see Billy Sims against the world, and look at those numbers. He's averaging a little better than 7 yards a carry, which is... Billy Sims going wide. He's got a touchdown. His second of the day.
Good call.
Mike Brady wide right, and here comes Billy Sims. And there goes Billy Sims to the 15-yard line. Boy. He got his first down as they knocked him out of bounds at the 14.
Isn't he beautiful in the open field? Here it is. Sweep to the bottom of the screen. Watch Sims make a move in and then come out. Now watch him give a leg and take it away here. Right here.
Perry missed him.
Getting the fresh air.
And Cromwell knocks him out of bounds.
That's the best tackler on him, the sideline.
Inside Thompson. Billy Sims goes out, and they throw it to Sims, and he gets away from Johnny Johnson. He's to the 45, midfield, to the 40, chased by Nolan Cromwell, and Cromwell slugs him out of bounds at the 18-yard line.
They've all done this, so it's one-on-one coverage. It's an underneath angle pattern. Missed tackle by Johnson, 20. Now, Cromwell is just as fast as Sims. There aren't many people going to outrun Nolan Cromwell.
So that stuns everybody. A 60-yard pass play. Take another look at it. Irvin charging, but there goes Sims off to the races. David Hill is out in front to block for him. That's Johnny Johnson, and here comes Cromwell, and the great athlete finally brings him down. And the Lions have been tearing him to shreds. Over 200 yards rushing. And Billy Sims wide open. There it goes. Cromwell can't catch him.
That's that fat. Look at that sideline. Look at the whole gang's coming off the bench.
41 yards to see the magnificent Billy Sims go for his third touchdown. Is he ever for real?
Okay. Yeah, like I say, I mean, 4 years later, he was pretty much done because of that devastating injury he suffered against the Minnesota Vikings. It's such a shame. Let's do another trivia question here. In what year did the Lions start playing in the Pontiac Silverdome after spending many years at Tiger Stadium? Yeah. You're thinking right. Very good. Yes, 1975, which was like 40 years before you were born. How old are you anyway? Okay. Okay, 19 years. I'm just joking with you, but that's really good because I knew that you were like way, that's pretty impressive that you knew that. That was way before you were even born. That was the year I graduated from high school, 75. But anyway, very good. Okay, you guys are, that's 4 trivia. You guys are 4 for 4, man. You guys are on the brink of greatness. It's very rare when I get a group that gets all 5 trivia questions right, and you're 4 for 4 already, so well done. It's very hard now to find video clips of NFL game film. NFL films and the NFL really prevent you from doing that in terms of like public viewing, and so it was hard to find. I was trying to find videos of Barry Sanders at his best because it requires to completely understand how fantastic he was to show him at his best. And I had another video that I showed, but this one is better. It's a little smaller, but it shows his greatness. And there are those who believe that Barry Sanders was the greatest running back who ever lived. He was definitely the most elusive running back who ever lived. His acceleration was absolutely phenomenal. He sometimes lost yards because he would dance around in the backfield a little bit, and the blocking wasn't always really that good for the Lions. They didn't have really great offenses around him, so the defenses were really keying on him. His moves were breathtaking. They're absolutely breathtaking, as you will see here.
Barry spins away from one tackle, cuts back to the left side. He's to the 20. He's to the 15.
Sanders. Lynch. His jock strap is laying sink still on about
draw play. Perry. Sanders. Running room, cuts to the 10. He's to the 5, and the pick it in.
Sanders making room on his own. And SDA, watch him freeze him. It's another. Barry Sanders.
Barry spins.
First and 10 from the 41. Sanders. And Sanders. I'll tell you what, this guy has Sanders still on his feet. Sanders is gone.
Okay, yeah, it wasn't a real long video, but I did want to show something like that. And the way that he juked, defenders, when he got past the defensive line and got into the second level, which is like linebacker level or beyond, is forget it. I mean, the thing with Barry Sanders is he was so dangerous because you could be on the 20-yard line or on the 10-yard line and he'd go 80 or 90 yards for a touchdown. No one else could really do that consistently, but it seemed like 6-7 times a season, if not more, he would run 50 plus yards for touchdowns. It was absolutely phenomenal, and I know how stunning it was, and I want to talk about that a little bit right now when he retired. Because he just did it. It was like Jim Brown, and same thing in Cleveland when Jim Brown retired after 9 seasons and led the NFL in rushing 8 of those seasons. Barry Sanders just did it so quickly, and he did it, at the beginning of training camp, and so it left everyone scrambling. But he just didn't, to play in the NFL, especially at that position, you really have to maintain your passion and your intensity. And once you lose that love for this game, and the running backs take so many hits, that's kind of just when he felt it was over, and he announced it. I know how disappointing it was I'm sure you Lions fans. It was shocking when he retired. Now let's talk about the wide receivers, and it's funny because we talk about Megatron, Calvin Johnson. There was another receiver years before that was tremendous too, and he was the same kind of receiver. You know, he was like a big physical receiver, and his name was Herman Moore, and he kind of gets lost in the shuffle historically because of the greatness of Calvin Johnson. But Herman Moore was fantastic, and for like 4 or 5 seasons, there was nobody better in the NFL than Herman Moore. And here's some highlights of that great receiver.
Perryman creates an awesome challenge for any pass defense, especially when Herman Moore lines up on the other side. Number 84 has improved in each of his 5 seasons in Detroit. The reason is simple. The man works hard at his craft.
It's very important to be disciplined and to go out and dedicate yourself to getting better and understanding that the minute you start thinking you've reached your peak is the time you start to decline and you stop working as hard. So I go out and each year approach it that there's something I need to work on, and I dedicate myself to it. And because of that, I think it allows me to go out and maintain my self-confidence and enhance my talents.
Herman Moore enhanced his talents to the point of having one of the best seasons ever for a wide receiver.
Herman Moore up for it, got it.
1,686 yards with an NFL record 123 catches. 90 of those catches produced first down. 14 more produced touchdowns. Between them, Moore and Perryman combined for 231 catches, 3,174 yards, and were the first teammates ever to catch more than 100 balls each in the same season.
Herman Moore, what a grab! Nobody does it better.
And with Johnny Morton coming into his own, they shape up as one terrific trio for the future.
You know, it's funny. I was covering football by then as a sports writer, and I always thought about the Lions, and I was thinking, 41-37, 44-41, and they were scoring also points. That they had all these explosive receivers, and they had a good quarterback, and I'm like, get a defense already. You know, find a way to stop opponents. And they actually, this year, and we could talk about it after the program's over, they actually this year, toward the last half of this year, they started playing a lot better defense. So we'll see if that translates into the future. But it was really good to see them sneak over 500 at the end of the year. Now, I don't have to really say much about this. All I got to say is Megatron and enjoy.
Johnson was already an attractive prospect based on his size and college stats, but he added to the hype surrounding him through his performance at the NFL Combine. For a 6'5", 239-pound receiver, scouts were blown away by him running the 40-yard dash in only 4.35 seconds. His vertical and broad jumps were 42.5 and 139 inches respectively, placing him in the top 98th percentile and above for both. He demonstrated a combination of height, strength, speed, and overall athleticism that teams had never really seen before in a receiver. Because of this, Johnson was labeled a can't-miss talent and was selected by the Detroit Lions with the 2nd overall pick in the 2007 draft. Hampered some by a lower back injury, Johnson's rookie season with the Lions was nothing special. He appeared in 15 games for Detroit and started 10 of them while totaling 48 catches for 756 yards and 4 receiving touchdowns that year. While the total numbers weren't eye-popping, averaging 15.8 yards per catch was a sign of what was to come for Megatron. Johnson's second year in the NFL was much more memorable, for good and bad reasons. Megatron had a great year for himself, with 78 receptions for 1,331 yards and 12 touchdowns. He finished 5th in the league in receiving yards and led the NFL in receiving touchdowns. Johnson accomplished this on a team that went 0-16 that season. One could argue that his performance was even more impressive because of the bad team he was on, and the fact that he played with 5 different quarterbacks that year. People attributed this to the Lions' poor record. Megatron's first career Pro Bowl came in his 4th year in the league after totaling 77 catches for 1,120 yards and 12 touchdowns during the 2010 season. It was an honor that Johnson would go on to receive each season until his eventual retirement. Johnson built off of his first Pro Bowl year with a 2011 season that led to him being viewed as one of the top receivers in the game. He set career highs in all three major categories by amassing 96 catches, 1,681 yards, and 16 touchdowns. Johnson finished fourth in the NFL in receptions, first in receiving yards, and second in touchdowns that season. In a Week 17 matchup with the Green Bay Packers, Megatron had 244 receiving yards, which was a career best at the time, meaning he somehow topped that performance later in his career. That year, Johnson even helped Detroit reach the playoffs for the first time since 1999. Prior to the 2012 season, Johnson signed an 8-year extension with the Lions, worth $132 million, with $60 million guaranteed, making him the highest-paid receiver in the NFL. During the same offseason, Megatron was named as the cover athlete for the Madden 13 video game. Johnson did not rest on his laurels following his performance in 2011 and exciting offseason. He managed to take his game to another level in 2012, as he led the league in receptions and receiving yards with 122 catches for 1,964 yards. Megatron became the only player in the Super Bowl era to average over 120 yards per game in a season. And he also broke Jerry Rice's record for most receiving.
Okay. All right. Let's do your last trivia question here. And here it is. Let's see if you can go 5 for 5. Wayne Fontes was the coach of the Lions from 89 to 96. Had 3 good seasons, actually. They had some nice seasons under him. Who replaced him and coached the team from 97 to 2000? No. Bobby Ross. Give yourselves a hand, folks. You went 5 for 5 on trivia. Good job. That's, like I say, that's pretty rare. I usually, get 3 out of 5 or 4 out of 5 at the best, and you guys nailed all of them. Good job. Okay. Matthew Stafford was the longest-running starting quarterback for the Lions by far. Actually, about 10 years, if I'm not mistaken. He was their starting quarterback, 9 or 10 years. And he got sick of losing, and he wanted to go somewhere. He was over 30 years old. He wanted to go somewhere where he could feel more assured that he was going to at least compete for a Super Bowl, which he did. But it was a very difficult decision. He loved playing in Detroit, and it was heart-wrenching for him to leave after all those years. And he talked about that. And like I say, there's some highlights of Matthew Stafford here, but it's hard to find highlights anymore for NFL films because they don't really allow it. But here's a little bit about the process he went through mentally and emotionally to make that decision that leave Detroit.
There are games we will never forget.
I still remember we played the Chargers in 2011.
Stafford gonna throw for it. Touchdown!
We made the playoffs, clinched the playoffs with that win here at home for the first time in a bunch of years, and I'll never forget the crowd.
And there are some games we wish we could forget.
Is there like one moment where you just think, God?
There's plenty of those, to be honest with you, but I mean, the one that comes to mind when you say that right off the bat would be when the Packers hit that Hail Mary on Thursday night.
Does he have a vintage moment in him? In the end zone, it is caught for the win!
We've watched him fall and get right back up. Like Detroit, the city he adopted, Matthew is tough, resilient. We may not have always liked the outcome, but man, did we appreciate the fight.
The decision to leave, how hard was that for you?
Probably the hardest conversation I've ever had in my life, it was a really tough deal.
Okay. All righty. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to talk a little bit about the team this year because this was kind of exciting for me. I mean, I'm a Browns guy, but, I don't know how much you know about Cleveland football, but this is really the first time in my life I'm a huge Cleveland sports fan. Love the Guardians, the Indians, Guardians, the Cavaliers, and the Browns, but this is really the first time in my life where I didn't really care about a particular team, whether they won or lost, because I was just so sick of the losing for the Browns, and I kind of had that empathy for Lions fans as well, because they've gone through the same thing over the years. The winless season, the Browns had their winless season too, and so it was really kind of cool to see the Lions come. I think they were 1-6, at one point this year, so they won 8 out of the last 10 games, which is sweet. They almost made the playoffs. I was wondering also, did they have a chance to make the playoffs going into the last week if something had happened? And then Seattle won, right? Seattle knocked them out. Okay. But anyway, they had some really kind of under under the radar. Jared Goff had such a good year, and maybe the best kept secret in the NFL. And I'm not sure if I'm even pronouncing it correctly. It's Amon Ray, right? I'm on Ross St. Brown. Okay, because you don't hear it very much. And I'm on Ross St. Brown, and Jamal Williams, right there, running back. It's good to see, and I hope it wasn't like a one-year wonder. I hope they're still young enough, I think, where they might be able to continue their growth. So that was nice to see, and I'm sure it was encouraging, for you folks to see the Lions play as well as they did in the last 10 games. What I want to do is I want to turn the program over to you wonderful people and turn it over for any questions or comments that you might have for me. I'll be glad to answer them, or we can discuss the Lions or the Tigers or the Bears, oh my. And sports we could talk about, or we could talk about horseradish or whatever you feel like talking about. Just raise your hand and yeah. I'm sorry, say that again? Oh, ever? Well, I'm old school, so I could say Mel Farr or whatever. But I would have to say I would have to say Sanders or Calvin Johnson. Yeah, I mean the great. It's amazing as much as the Lions have struggled that they had 2 of the greatest players who ever lived at their positions. Anybody else? Any questions, comments for me? Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Right. Yeah, and there weren't a lot of, it wasn't really that prominent when Billy Sims played. It was more prominent then than it was earlier, but guys coming out of the backfield and getting a lot of touches out of the backfield, catches and a lot of yards. I think the first guy to really take off in that department was Marshall Falk. He was a 1,000-yard receiver and a 1,000-yard rusher, but before the 90s, and it wasn't really, so everyone, Jim Brown, they all caught passes and they all did well, but they weren't really specialists in that. But Billy Sims, Billy Sims, a Hall of Famer, if he continued on that path. Well, I know that the players did. I don't think that it's so incredibly important to have the utmost respect from your players in the NFL, and I don't know if toward the end of his career anyway, Matt Millen really they talk about coaches that their voices get drowned out or they get ignored at a certain point, or it gets old at a certain point. I think that's what happened to Matt Millen, and you know what I mean. Not too many coaches can win with crummy players, and Matt Millen didn't always have very good teams, so it's mostly the players, but I actually liked Matt Millen as a person. I think he was an okay guy, but we'll see. Yeah. Anybody else? Okay. Yeah. Oh. Well, I don't remember Jim Brown particularly. Obviously him, I remember him like carrying tacklers into the end zone and stuff when I was a little kid. The guy that replaced him as a Hall of Fame running back was named Leroy Kelly. And I think Leroy Kelly would be my favorite Cleveland Browns player of all time. Bernie Kosar as well. Yeah. Yeah, well, that's before my time. We're talking about, yeah, it takes a lot to be before my time. I just turned 66 years old, but Otto Graham was before my time. He retired when I was 1. So I remember him well. Yeah. Oh, I covered that game. 98.5 yards. They had a 4th and 15 on that drive too, where Elway completed a pass. What's interesting is the Browns had the ball in overtime. They got the coin flip, and they had a 3rd and 2, and they had 2 running backs who had gained 1,000 yards the year before, both of them, Kevin Mack and Ernest Biner. And instead they gave the ball to Herman Fontenot, and he got stuffed, and they had to punt, and you know what happened from there. Denver went and went all the way downfield and scored. And then the next year was the fumble, Ernest Biner's fumble, that prevented them from tying that game. It's been torturous. They've actually come a lot closer than the Lions have to actually get to a Super Bowl, but they haven't gotten there. And then in the last 20 years, they haven't really even gotten close. Yeah. Yes, they did. Yes, they did. They played several times in the 50s, and they lost a game. It was very lopsided, actually. I think the Browns won that game 56 to 10. Very good. Okay, 56 to 10. Yeah, that was after the. Yeah, that's right. They had a great rivalry going. I think they played 4 times for the championship in the 50s. 52, 53, right? 55, 56, whatever, 54. What's that? Oh, George Wilson. Yeah, Wilson, right. Oh, yeah, the runner-up bowls. I forgot about that. Yeah, they had the runner-up bowls, right, where the 2 teams that made it to that didn't make it actually played off against each other. The runner-up bowls, I remember they used to have a college all-star game too, where the NFL champion would play at the beginning of the next year in the exhibition season. They would play the college all-star team, I think it was. Yeah, college all-star team. Yeah, I remember that. They also had these weird division names. They had a Century Division, and in the NFL back then, it was back in the 60s. Interesting stuff. Anybody else have any questions? Yeah. Yes. Yes. That would be the answer. Yes. Art Modell is still a villain, although there was a lot of blame to go around as to why the Browns left for Baltimore in 1995. Yes, I was, and it was very, very disappointing, to say the least. Yeah, and they just didn't take Art Modell seriously. But on the other hand, Art Modell never said, "I am leaving if you don't build me a new stadium." And the day after he announced that he was going to Baltimore, they announced that they were going to renovate Cleveland Stadium for him, and he said it's too late. But Art Modell is absolutely vilified in Cleveland. In fact, Tony Grossi, who I used to work with, he was a sports writer for the Plain Dealer, covered the Browns for decades, keeps fighting every year to keep Art Modell out of the Hall of Fame. So I don't know if Art Modell will ever get in, but if Tony Grossi has his way, he will not. And you know what? They won the NFL championship with Art Modell in '64, but as their owner, but he didn't. They didn't win anything. They didn't win any They didn't go to any Super Bowls with Art Modell as their owner. Yep. Yeah. 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 Back then, they were all smoking, right? Yeah. I remember looking that up. What was it? I was writing something about smoking, and there was, I think, 53% of all adults back in like 1958 or whatever were smokers. I don't see that many people smoking anymore. I think that's a good thing, you know. Smoking is, I think the word about the dangers of smoking have really gotten through, especially to young people. I don't think that many smoke anymore, although I'm sure some do, and I don't know what they're smoking either, so that's another thing. Yeah. I think one of the things that makes me feel most my age is the knowledge that I remember Super Bowl I. The knowledge that I remember Super Bowl I, I was like, and now we're at Super Bowl 56 or whatever it is now, you know, 57 coming up. It's crazy. And I'll Super Bowl III when Joe Namath with a guarantee beat the Colts. That's the one. After all these years, that's the one I'll remember the most. Anybody else? Well, one other thing I want to mention here, as you see up on the screen, with the holidays only 11 and a half months away, you might start thinking about what you want to give as a gift. I stupidly forgot I left them at home. I got my Detroit Tigers Time Machine book, but if you want a copy, I'll send you one. All I need is your address and your name, and I'll send you a copy. I autograph and I personalize all my books for free. I won more than 45 awards as a sports writer. I had to pay off the judges, but technically I won the awards. And I only tell you that to let you know I write in a very entertaining style. And my autograph, I'm going to let you guys in a little secret. My autograph adds 3 cents to the value of this book. So there you go. If you have any people that you might want to get that book for, I'll send it to you right away. I have copies at home, and they're only $20. And like I say, I can autograph and personalize it for free. And it's a complete history of the Tigers. It's the only book that really details the entire history of Detroit baseball, going back to the late 1800s and all the way to today. So the book is a lot of fun. And if you'd like a copy, I will just take down your name and address and send it to you tomorrow. So you'll get it in the mail soon enough for anyone. I can personalize it for anyone you'd like. Thank you so much. Anyone else have any questions for me? Anything that they want to ask or comment on? Okay. Well, thanks for having me. Yeah. All right.